Okay, let's get started. Hello and good afternoon. We are very happy to restart our webinar series, UPTAKE webinar series after the summer holidays. I hope everybody had a good holiday season and come back to work with more energy. So we have started our webinar series this time in September, talking about biomass and biofuels, and this is a hot topic still. I'm gonna just share a very short presentation about the background of this project and where we are coming from and what is already planned for the next months. And then I will hand it over to our great panel here to have this discussion. So allow me to share my screen. Okay. So let me go back. Yes. So as you know, we are organizing monthly webinar series on carbon dioxide removal or CDR. It's every second Wednesday of the month at 2 p.m. Central European Time. It's an online event, but registration is required. So we encourage all of you who have seen the link for registration to continue following the news from the project on the LinkedIn or other social media and email services that we send around and register for the upcoming events. So the events are organized by CMCC ICC program. CMCC is a leading research center on climate change based in Italy. We have about 450 researchers and staff across 3 institutes and 3 centers, as you can see in the map. We are all over Italy in different cities. We are currently this group that organizing the webinars. We are in Milan, which is the home for one of the institute, which is the Institute on the Economy and Policy, EIEE. The other 2 institutes, ICR and IESP, are looking at different aspects of climate modeling and also climate resilience. We also have 3 cross-cutting programs. Global Coast as a new frontier, predicting socio-economic impacts of climate change and integration of the planetary biogeochemical and industrial carbon cycle. That is the ICC program, which is basically organizing this webinar series. The UPTAKE project, the host of this webinar series, is a European funded project. We started in 2023. The project is going for 4 years. As you can see the list of partners, we have about 20 partners in different European countries, and also Switzerland and UK, 9 EU partners are member of our consortium. We have developed a platform to engage better with the stakeholders outside our consortium. This includes businesses, policymakers, civil society, and other research universities and institutes. To join this platform and have a chance to interact with the member of the consortium and also among other stakeholders, you can basically scan this QR code and you will be directed to a very simple registration form which allows you to access the online platform. There you can see all the news about the project and also all the results that are being shared before publication, and we get some feedback from stakeholders on that also. Here today we are joined by a good panel of speakers who are gonna help us basically go deeper into the issue of biomass usage to get us to net zero and what it means for the European energy system. The speaker is Markus from Chalmers, and the panel is moderated by Karim from Carbon Impact. And we are joined also by a panelist, Mille from Biocarb. So just to tell you next step into our webinar series, and also if you like to interact with the talk today, you can use the Q&A section at the bottom of this page. Please use that to post the questions. Next month, instead of webinar, we are organizing our second UPTAKE stakeholder workshop, which will be on October 9 from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. You can register here. Again, scan this QR code and register. We are gonna post the link also on the Q&A section after this presentation, my presentation. But you can register and join for free that workshop. We will have 4 great panels during the day with great speakers, moderators, and discussants. So it will be like an extension of these webinars that we have once a month there. We will have 4 of these panels in one day, October 9. Then in November 12th, we will go back to our usual format like today, and we will have the next webinar. So stay tuned for that. Having said that, I will stop sharing and I will hand it over to Karim to continue. Thank you very much.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is Karim Rahmani. I'll be happy to moderate this webinar, and I'm a co-founder of Carbon Impact, which is a bio-CCS, a BECCS developer based in France. So just before jumping into the panel, I'm happy to introduce, and I will let my co-panelists introduce themselves. So let's start by you, Mille.
Thank you very much, Karim. I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Mille, and I work at a company called Biocarb Solution, and we also do BECCS carbon removal based in Denmark, working with Danish biogas plants to remove some carbon. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think that was the quick introduction.
Thank you very much. And Markus?
Yeah, hi. Also, thank you for this opportunity to present our work. I'm currently working at RISE, Research Institutes of Sweden, but most of the work that I will present was done at Chalmers. And yeah, I work on energy systems modeling with the European scope and with different research questions considering biomass, carbon management, but also other aspects of the challenge.
Right. So I think we are here today because you have published a paper recently. So Markus, why don't you take maybe next 20 minutes to go through the main work that you have done on working on this topic, and I think we'll have a discussion just afterwards. But Markus, the floor is yours till the next 20 minutes or something.
Yeah. Thank you. So the paper is called Diversity of Biomass Usage Pathways to Achieve Emissions Targets in the European Energy System. And it was just in January published in Nature Energy, together with a companion policy brief that is also worth, I think, reading. So I've done this work together with my co-authors, Fredrik Hedenius, Lina Reichenberg and Jørgen Berndes from Chalmers, and Elisabeth Seyen and Fabian Neumann from the TU Berlin. And basically what we address here is, well, the question of biomass from a broad perspective. We all know biomass is a limited resource. It's a heterogeneous resource, so some sorts of biomass are considered unsustainable and others might be more sustainable. Some are hard to reach and are currently not so much used, and so on. And there's a huge transition obviously happening there, also at the EU level, where we transition away from first generation biofuels to more advanced biofuels based on residues. And there are obviously a lot of trade-offs involved. And also for the new Renewable Energy Directive, the third one at the European level, it was actually proposed to exclude forest residues as a sustainable resource to achieve targets. And I would argue that the knowledge basis for the consequences of excluding this resource for the energy system weren't that well understood. And I hope that this study can shed some light on the value of biomass and the severity of the trade-off involved of these such policy decisions. But yeah, so a lot of trade-offs, and I think people know that we need to, we cannot use unlimited amounts of biomass, but still it has some value in the energy system. And that's kind of the classical question: what is a cost-effective use of biomass, and especially biomass residues, which we focus on here in the energy system. So that's like the umbrella question for our work, and obviously it can be used for fuels. We still, like, even though we electrify a lot of land transport, we still foresee a large demand in aviation and shipping, for instance, and also maybe in like truck transport, possibly. And also another value is variation management. When we have a very variable system based on solar and wind, there are times of the year, so-called Dunkelflaute, where we probably need backup power. So biomass can obviously serve that purpose as well. Industry needs both like carbon and also hydrogen as feedstocks, which biomass can provide, but also you can use it to power your heat and other demands. And another important one, of course, is negative emissions, which are probably or most likely necessary to achieve any net zero targets. For one, to compensate for historical emissions, but also to compensate for emissions that are very, very hard to abate, for instance, from agriculture. But for all of these options, we also have competing options, right? So we need to look at this with quite a broad scope to assess what is actually the cost-effective use of biomass, what is the cost of, or like, what does a system look like where we minimize the amount of biomass or even remove it completely, and what are the trade-offs involved of doing so? Because to be fair, we don't really know how much biomass residues we have. All the studies like we see they come up with huge ranges. So there is quite a lot of uncertainty there, and that is partly a technical, like economical issue, but also a socio-political one. There are a lot of acceptance issues here. So it makes sense to look at this from a broad perspective. And this is what we have tried to do in this study. So I will go straight to our method here. We've used an energy system model based on PIPSA EUR-SEC, the European sector-coupled version. Nowadays it's called PIPSA EUR only. And basically we optimize capacity and dispatch for all sectors. Like we have electricity, of course, we have heat, we have industry, we have transport, and so on, agriculture. And it's open source. So it's been scrutinized, it's constantly developed, and it's used by many. So it's easy to check what we have assumed and used. And the setup in this case, we have the resolution of Europe in like more or less one node per country, and a 5-hour temporal resolution, and an overnight scenario, meaning we're looking at 1 year only, a year where we achieve a set target. And the results that I present now, therefore a net negative target, but we've also looked at net zero, and we obtained quite similar results, but you can read more about that in the paper. But in the net negative case, we look at minus 110% CO2 emissions compared to 1990. And we also limit the amount of carbon storage available, which has also a big effect on the system. But we also handle this in a sensitivity analysis, which again, you can read more about. And also importantly, we have, in all cases where we have biomass involved, we also have competitors based on electricity and also fossils. Yeah, so we don't really like know from the beginning where it will end up, because we have alternatives everywhere. Also for negative emissions, we have direct air capture. So just to kind of show all the routes that, and this is all, again, even a simplified version of all the options. So it's kind of a complex salad that the model has to solve, and it has to do this in a high spatial and temporal resolution, where we have a lot of variability in the system and so on. And the model we use is obviously very suited for this purpose. So some short words on what we assume for biomass. Basically, we assume domestic residues based on a medium scenario from JRC and Spacer database. But we also include from like an average of integrated assessment model results, an import of biomass, which is quite a bit more expensive. Of course, this doesn't necessarily have to be imported. It can also be like an expansion of the domestic residue usage. But just to avoid results where, because we have limited biomass, we know that we have to fill it up, which is quite a common assumption in many energy system models, which is in contrast to many integrated assessment models where we see a lot of biomass used and a lot of BECCS and so on. And so we wanted to see, even if we make it expensive, how valuable is biomass if we don't restrict it. And all the biomass options, except small-scale heating, can be attached to carbon capture. And this carbon capture is assumed to be quite expensive. There is an energy penalty involved and a substantial infrastructure cost. And then let's move straight to results. So basically what we have done, we have looked at near optimal results. So basically we obtain a least cost solution, and then we allow some slack in terms of cost and minimize and maximize something else. And then we obtain feasible solution spaces for different options. In this case, biomass, but we have also looked at solution spaces for wind and solar and for individual biomass usage options and carbon capture and so on. For biomass, we see that we do get quite a bit of biomass in the least cost solution. So it's about 29% of primary energy, of which the rest is wind, solar, and a little bit of hydropower. And this, if we compare to the basically total bioenergy used today in Europe, it's about like 40% more, which obviously is quite a bit. And also it involves quite a big transition since we're only using biomass residues. So we would have to mobilize quite a bit more of forest residues, for instance, and other residues, which we are not using as much of today, instead of today's first generation biofuels. So it does involve quite a big transition, and obviously it's not certain if we can muster that amount of biomass sustainably. You can compare it to the high biomass residue potential from JRC and Sprays, and that's about on par with the result that we get. But obviously, there are trade-offs involved, and if we limit the biomass roughly to current usage, then we obtain a system that's 5% more costly, which might be acceptable considering all the trade-offs involved when increasing the use of biomass and so on. But if we completely remove biomass, then we end up with a 20% higher system cost, which it might not sound a lot, but it's actually, for an individual option, it's quite a lot. So it basically the same as completely excluding wind power or completely excluding electrolyzer, which are considered like the backbone of the energy transition. And you can also compare it to the defense spending in the EU before the war, to be fair, but it's still quite a lot. So about 1% of GDP. We might be, I mean, in terms of cost, accept this because there are a lot of trade-offs involved and a lot of acceptance issues. So it depends on your perspective, obviously, if that's like acceptable. In my view, I think the cost itself is not the big challenge. It's to scale up the other options if we don't have biomass. And we'll get a bit more there. But we also see that biomass usage is sensitive to biomass upstream emissions. So if we have any emissions associated with the biomass, that affects the system quite a lot. In some cases, it actually increases the use of biomass because you need more biomass to generate the same amount of negative emissions. So it's not always that it decreases the amount of biomass. It really depends on how the system looks. But yeah, that it is a very important factor. So reducing that is very key. And bioenergy with carbon capture, we see that it's very important. So most of the biomass usage is attached to carbon capture, and it is quite a lot, almost a gigaton. And in the setting we have, with some of this is used, the carbon captured carbon is used to produce e-fuels. We also have the option of bioelectrofuels, which can be quite a potential option where you don't need carbon capture. And obviously, some of it is stored to generate negative emissions. And we see that bioenergy with carbon capture can be excluded at a 13% higher system cost. And obviously there, the alternative is direct air capture, which is quite a bit more costly. And we see that attaching bioenergy usage obviously enhances carbon efficiency, which is very important. So the more we can make use of the carbon in the biomass, the less biomass we need for the same service, and obviously the less risk it involves, and also less cost. So actually, even though carbon capture is costly, it is a very important technology in this case. An alternative for fuel production to carbon capture is electrobiofuels, again, where you don't need carbon capture. So yeah, that is also an important option. Yeah, I'll skip that in interest of time. So basically, we have looked at the individual And for solid biomass, we see that in the least cost case, we have quite a bit of biofuels, like 40% of the energy in fuels are from biomass, and we have some process heat, and we don't have any CHP actually. But looking at near optimal solutions, we see that there's quite a lot of there's quite a big span. If we only increase the system cost by a little bit, we can have as much as about 50% CHP in district heat, and between 0 and 100, or more than 100 even, percent of process heat, and also a large span for liquid fuels. So what we conclude from this and other analysis is that actually it's not as important what we use biomass for, as long as we take care of the carbon in the biomass. So we can kind of recycle biomass carbon, so we can use it first, say in a CHP or in a heat process, and if we have carbon capture, we can reuse it to produce fuels or negative emissions. This obviously depends on the scale up of carbon capture, which is uncertain, and also the scale up of hydrogen and electricity to produce hydrogen, which is needed to produce e-fuels. So if we're very restricted on this, then biofuels would be a strong use case, but that's, I guess, another story. We also see that dispatchable biopower or bio-CHP can provide a huge service actually in the system. So in these Dunkelflaute events, you want cheap power and possibly heat supply, and in this case it's supplied by gas turbines, which are powered by biogas, and that as a backup solution has quite a large value. I was surprised that it was so valuable actually. So that, except for that usage, I would say it's not as important what we use biomass for if we take care of the carbon used in the biomass. So just to summarize quickly, so basically if we remove biomass residues, we obtain a 20% higher energy system cost, which is similar to wind power and electrolyzers. So it's quite substantial. The main value of biomass is not as much energy provision. That has value too, but carbon provision is even more valuable, and for utilization and also for negative emissions. So as I said, backup power is important, but apart from that, it's not as crucial what biomass is used for, is what we find. And that holds if the usage is basically connected to carbon capture. And that's possible also in biofuel production, where you have quite low carbon efficiencies unless you capture the carbon, like the excess carbon, or add hydrogen to make more use of the carbon in the biomass. And one more about carbon capture, since this is the umbrella topic of this series. So because of the high cost of carbon capture, high capital expenditure, it is cost effective in processes with high capacity factors. So that's mainly the reason why we don't see it in CHPs, but we do have, as I showed, near optimal solutions where we do have bio-CHPs, based on solid biomass. But in that case, they run base load, and then it's coupled with heat storage to be able to match the seasonality of heat demand, and also to some extent of electricity demand. So that is an important factor, and obviously the value of carbon in the energy, the increasing value of carbon will change the economics of these investments. So more things need to be factored in, not just energy. And one thing that I didn't really have time to touch on, but something that you can read more on or we can discuss, is that the most challenging part in the energy system are basically renewable chemicals and liquid fuels. So that's where if we reduce the amount of biomass, or reduce the amount of hydrogen, or reduce the amount of wind and solar, or even carbon capture, that's where things happen. So that's like the hardest sector to abate, and the most sensitive to perturbances. And I guess that hopefully that provides a good summary of the paper, and I'm happy to discuss.
Thank you very much, Markus. Really appreciate it. I mean, it's first of all, wow, it's a quite high encompassing topic. Thanks for having, first of all, jumped into this topic and studied it with such a wide overview. And you have lots of societal topics, issues with biodiversity, etc., which are behind in the hindsight. So very appreciate your contribution to the global knowledge on this topic. So maybe what we'll do is we'll have a few minutes to have a first exchange with Mille and yourself, Markus, and we'll start with a few questions, and then in the audience, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them just after this sequence. But maybe to go through as a very first quick questions for you, Markus. Well, maybe two questions. So first of all, when you say energy system, could you maybe define what you mean by that? Is that electricity plus some other sectors? What about transport, like in terms of electrification industry? So maybe it would be helpful to explain what you include in it. And at the end, maybe as a super summarized way of your report. So what's the role of bioenergy? Because we could envision a role where the energy system doesn't need, is fully electrified in a way, right? You don't need any more to burn biomass or to use any waste biomass to provide energy. You could envision a future where electricity, renewable or decarbonized, is cheap and abundant. So why do you think there's still in the models a significant and even an increased role for bioenergy in the future?
We can't hear you, Markus. I think you muted.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. Yeah, let's start with the first question. What sectors do we include? So yeah, we include all energy sectors, and by that we mean obviously electricity. We include transport, which means land transport, aviation, shipping, and also some agriculture actually. We include industry, so basically the chemical demand in the industry and the heat demand and also electricity demand of industry. And a lot of this is assumed to be electrified. So like steel production, in this case, we assume it's fully electrified through different ways. Land transport is fully electrified in these scenarios. Yeah, and then we have the heat sector. So basically room heating and water heating. So yeah, we cover all sectors that use energy in Europe. And the second question, we can electrify basically everything, yes. Some things are harder, obviously, to electrify than others. But even if we, like, in this case, we haven't assumed that we electrify, for instance, aviation. That is not really, like, you can electrify part of aviation, yes, like short haul flights, but it's not really like, most people don't think that we are electrifying a long haul or even running them on hydrogen. So we still demand hydrocarbons in aviation, and also we assume a partial demand of hydrocarbons in shipping. And because of what you're saying, yeah, we can electrify a lot of things, and we can obtain energy from other parts, but it's not as easy to obtain carbon, which we do need also in these sectors that I mentioned, but also in chemical sector. And there we see that direct air capture is obviously the non-fossil alternative, and it is quite costly. And even if it is, and we have done a sensitivity analysis of this that I mean, I didn't have time to go into, even if we assume that direct air capture is quite cheap, it is outcompeted by bioenergy with carbon capture. So, and therefore we see that it is quite competitive compared to direct air capture, even if we are optimistic about the development of direct air capture. So that's really the key value of biomass in the long term, which is different today. Obviously, today more the energy supply and quickly replacing fossils like coal and so on. But in the long term, it's more about the carbon.
Okay, yeah, very interesting perspective. So it's not necessarily the bioenergy which is interested here, but it's the capacity to get carbon and biogenic, basically circular carbon, right? So maybe this is a question for Mille then. So of course, when you combust and or use biomass for something, you get bio CO2 out of the process. So what can we do actually? How do you see the usages of bio CO2 in a future energy system? Or
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you to Markus as well for this report. I do think it is very interesting to read, and I I agree with the conclusions of it, right? That the carbon that we get out of the biomass also has a great value. I could get back to that later on. But if we go on the high level, right? What should we use the CO2 for? We have this biogenic CO2 source for us at Biocarb Solution. It's from biogas plants. And as you said, Markus, right, there's two ways to use it. We could either utilize it for food or any way where we can replace the fossil CO2, or we can do what we do here at Biocarb Solution. We can store it and thereby creating CDR credits. And I think we need to talk about as well that CDR and carbon removal has a big role to play in order for us to reach net zero. If you ask IPCC, we will need to remove 10 gigatons of CO2 by 2050. We can't do that alone with BECCS. And you said, Markus, I think it was 0.9 gigaton we could get from BECCS. But then again, we need to split that between what should we utilize and what can we remove. And from a BECCS project, it's also about, you mentioned as well, the costs are very high. So what can make the business case run? Where is there a market right now for getting all this up and running, right? Yeah, so it has a big role to play. I just want to add every time I speak about removals as well, that removals will never be a quick fix. We need to do it together with reductions. So it's only for the residual emissions, of course. Yeah, but that's how I see the value of the CO2, right? And if it should go to one or the other, right now we're looking for removals because that's where the business case hopefully will be, because it is expensive to start up these projects. Yeah.
Right, yeah, but it's a mix at the end between basically removals, meaning a sequestration at the end, permanent sequestration of CO2, primarily in geologic formations, but potentially in durable products. And the other one, it's a usage where I think the main things that are already coming into the horizon with electrofuels, basically, right? So, but Markus, what would be then in your study the mix? You know, you said if we go with like a high biomass scenario, with 40% more biomass than today, which is significant. But in that scenario, what would be the mix between the bio CO2, which would go down and sequestered, and the one which will be used into the economy in the electrofuels or other uses?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it really depends on how much fossils we allow in the system, or how much carbon sequestration we manage to scale up. So how much carbon can we store? And that's more or less the same thing. The more carbon storage you have, the more fossils you can compensate for. In this, what I showed here was quite a restrictive scenario on the carbon sequestration. So it's an almost renewable system. And in that case, we do need to use the carbon to produce fuels. So as I said, we had 900 megatons of carbon capture. In this scenario where we have minus 110% negative emissions, we actually need 600 megatons to be stored for negative emissions. Or actually, some of them are just to compensate for process emissions, for like from cement and so on, which is also included. And then the rest, 300, is used for producing e-fuels. But if you give more slack, that's the CCU part is actually the one that is removed also, or decreased the quickest. So if we give more, permit more fossils, or increase carbon sequestration capacity, then CCU is removed in favor of CCS. So it really depends on that setting, and there are many parameters that are involved. They're technical and socio-political and so on.
Okay, yeah, but in the optimal scenario in terms of cost, it's like 2/3 sequestration, 1/3 usage, basically, and then lots of variability depending on other parameters.
Yes.
Right. So 600 million tons. Let's say we put ourselves in a scenario where we use a lot of biomass, and 2/3 of it is sequestered. That's a lot. But aren't we then reaching Mille some limits in terms of sustainable biomass? I think that's and what we mean by that is a key question, I guess.
Yeah, definitely, and you touched upon this, I think, as well, Markus, in the article, right? And you can start by asking what is sustainable biomass, and people won't agree on that one. Working in the carbon removal space, we need to get our credits certified, and not all certification bodies have the same limits as to what biomass you are allowed to use. So that's one thing that's just to give a concrete example of it's not that easy to say what is sustainably sourced. You mentioned RED 2, RED 3, I think you mentioned, and the biogas plants we work with today live up to RED 2 directive, right? Because that's what we kind of have. So if we make sure that we live up to the Renewable Energy Directive, we feel pretty good about it. But there is a limit to it. And I think, and you talked about this as well, Markus, in some ways, the limit is both in the overall amount that we have, that there is a natural limit here, where that is to be seen. But there's also the geographical limit, because in Denmark and in the biogas business in Denmark, where I'm situated, right, we still have a lot of agricultural waste that goes directly to the fields. I think it's maybe 35–40% of the ag waste that today goes into a biogas plant. So we have a lot of potential to get more into the biogas plants, but that's not the case different places, right? And then when you combine that with transportation issues, some places will have a lot of biomass and others will be limited. So yeah, it's not an easy question, but there is definitely a limit, and it will vary depending on who you ask and where you are situated. But it is very important to stress it and to live up to whatever regulation there is already, because we don't want to, and we can't sell carbon removals or CDR credits. It won't pass certification if it's making emissions elsewhere. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, for sure. Thanks. So that's helpful. I think this is basically an open question, and it will probably be in the next years, maybe decades. There's lots of I think the referee today is RED 2 and RED 3, and I guess one of the reasons to have this report is this option to limit woody biomass in the first place. So I think this is an ongoing debate. And as a removal sector and any use of bio CO2 sector in general, we need to be very attentive to that and make sure we're in sync with what are the options taken by society. But maybe
and I think if I can add just one more, I think you came with a good point here as well, Markus, right? Depending on how much biomass we will need, the risk of it not being sustainable for the next ton or the next ton will be even bigger. So we really need to think about optimizing all paths, right? Not just biomass, but we need to electrify, and we need to get all these things up and running as well in order for us to have the most sustainable biomass, if it makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's all connected.
It's all as a system for sure. And then talking about removal specifically, Mille, which is your area of focus, what are the incentives? So you mentioned the CDR credits. So how does that work, and what's the outlook of this one in the next few years?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm happy that Markus says it has a lot of value, because right now the market, to be honest, does not have enough demand. So it is valuable if you want to decarbonize. But let's say there is some things in place, right? We have SAF requirements for aviation. We have talks about CDR being implemented in the EU ETS, plans about implementing it in the UK ETS, and so on. So there are some good signs, but it's still driven by a voluntary carbon market. PTX projects, at least the ones I know of here in Denmark and the Nordics, are not going as planned. And the prices or the value they can pay for the biogenic CO2 does not make the business case run for us. So there are some if we want to decarbonize, it has this value, but in the real world, we don't have the regulations to incentivize that enough for the companies to take that responsibility. So in many ways, to put it very simple, it's the carrot and the stick, right? We've tried a long time with the carrot. It's not working its wonders. So maybe we need a little bit more of the stick to get the market up and running, because there's a lot of projects. I can tell you a pipeline of projects, ourselves included, or biogas plants that want to come online and sequester the carbon, but you need firm demand before you will take FID on substantial investments. And on top of that, we have all the storage sites and all that stuff that needs to get up and running, and infrastructure if you want to transport it from other places. We're lucky in Denmark, we have everything here. So
yes, you are.
more stick. It's more demand.
Clear. No, okay, thanks a lot. So I think we have done answered some of the first questions, but let us have a look at some of the audience questions here. So well, first of all, I think this webinar is being recorded, so the organizers will share the link in a few days, I assume. There's a question about the like peatlands and wetlands and other natural sinks. So how do you see the role of natural sinks, Markus? I mean, is that something inside your modeling, or did you go more for like permanent geologic storage as a basis?
Okay, so basically we didn't go into details of that, but we use the potentials that we got from JRC and Space medium scenario. And as I said, we also included a much more expensive addition to that. I mean, how we address these upstream emissions, we have done that in a sensitivity analysis. And as I said, it really does affect the value of biomass. It decreases the value of biomass quite a bit. But no, we haven't looked at wetlands and peatlands explicitly in this study. We're focusing on the energy system.
Okay.
I would love to do that study though.
Yeah, because there's two types. I mean, there's different carbon removal options with various cycles. So I think that generally the natural sinks are suitable to compensate like short-lived emissions, whereas if you're talking about fossils or historic emissions, then the durable option is, I think there's like for like principle, right, to apply if you want to reach net zero or net negativity. Okay, there's a question about pulp and paper. Yeah, I guess it's one of the sectors which is a consumer of carbon because we needed to create fiber, right? So was that included in your modeling of industry to some extent?
So like that kind of material use of biomass is it's considered in these biomass potentials that we're using. So JRC and Speso is providing us information of the residues coming from pulp and paper and other like construction and so on sectors. So it's implicitly included. So we don't model all biomass available. We model biomass residues when construction, pulp and paper and so on has happened. But we do include chemicals in the sector. But yeah, again, this is something that I would love to do. So
okay, right. So future topic for future studies, yeah. Right. No, but in principle, it means that you still have modeled the use for the carbon in the economy and what molecules are needed for industry and for like the molecule value of it and not the energy value of it, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, no, we do see a value of the energy, but it's overshadowed by the carbon value. So that's where the opportunity cost is the highest. Like for energy, we have many options. We have solar and wind that are, the costs are decreasing quite a lot, and that can power hydrogen, which is also decreasing in cost. So in terms of cost, I think it's not a huge problem. What might be a challenge is to scale these things up enough to also cover like fuel demand and so on, that those hard to abate sectors. And that's where biomass comes in. And obviously, as you say, if we electrify all of this, we still need carbon, and biomass can provide that.
Okay. I think there was a very technical question about how to reduce the heat content of waste, but I guess this is another, let's say, warm box or complex issue, right? If you include waste stream into that, I guess the question was about the like household waste that is incinerated and has a biogenic content and also a carbon content, but maybe this is beyond the scope of your study at this stage, right?
Yeah, I don't really know exactly how to answer that actually.
Yeah, no, fine. I think it's a very detailed question. I think the waste today is based on the heat value, is based on what you input in it, and so it depends on which stream you're using. There's also a question about, if there's talk about excluding fully woody biomass from like renewable energy. So what's the plan? So it means what are the waste streams that are going to be used instead? Are we thinking really here about biogas and ag waste as the only sustainable biomass option if we exclude fully forests?
Can I answer as well?
Yeah, please jump in.
But it's just I think the place we are right now, with the challenges we have ahead, fully excluding anything would be very narrow. And I say that I understand why you would want to exclude forests, forest biomass residue. But some places it does make sense to include it. So yeah, it was just a comment that I wanted to say, because I do understand from biodiversity and all that stuff that we need some residues to stay out there, but some places it would, I think, only be, I think the best use of it would definitely be to sequester the carbon in it.
No, yeah, thanks for this comment. But I think coming back to the question, I guess when you have a scenario with zero biomass, is that all biomass, or is it just the woody part of biomass that you have excluded in the study? Or did you still have some in your model, some other type of biomass, like the one used for biogas plants?
No, in that case, we removed all biomass, so basically biogas and woody biomass, but not the waste. So the waste part of biomass, like from household waste. So that has to be incinerated and taken care of. That was not completely removed. So
Okay.
obviously it would be probably more expensive if we removed that also.
I just want to
Right.
add that in Denmark, we can use food waste in the biogas plants as well, so it doesn't need to be incinerated. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the regulations tend to reduce the amount of food waste into the household waste, so it can be used to create biomass instead of ending up in a landfill or even incinerated.
Yeah, sorry, just to correct, so we include the solid waste part, so which is incinerated. But yeah, I agree with you, of course.
And then there's a last question, maybe before we wrap up, about the cascade principle in the RED directive. Yeah, I guess so. You use the biomass for the best usage or the most valuable, and then you go down, and you end up with like energy. Is that I guess it's a principle, from what I understand, that was used in your modeling, right, as an underlying assumption.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, to an extent, it's implicitly in there based on the residues that we use from JRC and space, so where you already have used biomass for something, and then you have residues, and also you have yeah, recycling is something that we didn't address here, and obviously that would decrease the need for like virgin biomass, and yeah, that is something that would is very important in the system and would decrease cost to make use of more of the biomass, and something that we unfortunately didn't address here.
Another idea for a future webinar. So maybe really to end up, I wanted to hand the last question and comment to you, Mille, before we wrap up. So someone says, are we implying that today the carbon market is not viable? So can you reply on this one? I think this is what you mentioned, right? So what to do to make it viable?
Well, yeah, we need more. I think it goes for all climate ambitions, right? It's all voluntary. So will we reach the Paris Agreement if everything is voluntary? No, I don't believe so. And I think what we've seen so far is that we won't. We are not reaching the goals we want to do and we plan to do, and people can just resign, or countries can resign if they want, without big penalties or anything like that. So it's not working with the speed needed to reach the goals we have. That's a quick, sad answer, but more stick. Sorry.
This is perfect. So I'd like to thank everyone and the organizers for this event and all the attendees. And enjoy the rest of your day, and be in touch soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.